Yes. Right. This is about, I'm going to tell you about how we developed our strategic way forward for wildfires in Northern Ireland. Um, but I'm going to take a step back because largely our wildfire work all came to a head in April, May of 2011. We had the worst fires that we'd ever seen up to then, and thankfully we haven't seen the likes of the fire since then. We had a day where every single fire engine and fireman that we had on Northern Ireland, with the exception of a volunteer crew on one of the offshore islands, were all out fighting wildfires. The estimated cost to the fire service over a 3 month period was £8 million sterling. And we realized we couldn't keep putting those resources up in the mountains when they should be based in the urban centres where there's the greatest life risk, and we couldn't afford the money. So after the sort of dust settled, what was called the interdepartmental group was established, which had key government departments: Department of Health, Forest Service, Environment Agency, Agriculture, Water Service, the Fire Service, obviously. And they came together to try and address the issue. And what they did was they compiled a report that set out 8 recommendations to look at the establishment of a wildfire forum, and to look at and that it would develop a strategic management plan. That the forum would also issue weather or wildfire alerts. That we would look at a review of wildfire legislation. We don't have a single piece of legislation dealing with wildfire or prescribed burns. It's spread across multiple pieces of legislation. We were looking at also then the creation of bylaws in the Mourne Mountains. The Mourne Mountains are south of Belfast. They get a lot of recreational activity, but they are plagued with wildfires. And then we were looking at, could we put bylaws in place there to control the use of campfires, barbecues, prescribed burning, etc., etc. We'd also looking at, again, in the Mournes, how we would pilot one wildfire management plan. That we would start to raise awareness about the wildfire issue, and we would support any opportunities to go out to the public and landowners to talk about wildfires and the dangers and risks, etc. We also said we would look at reviewing advice that government give out to landowners or land managers for prescribed burning across heath and moorland, which were our 2 habitats which are most susceptible to wildfires and causes the most problems. And we would also start to undertake research about the relationships between wildfires and vegetation. So what was delivered since 2011, 2012? We started the Eastern Mournes Wildfire Project, and that's been running very, very successfully. We're now looking at reviewing it and going on to the Mournes Wildfire Project Part 2. We did a lot of raising awareness, both by government, by also our NGO sector. We funded them as a government agency. We run a grant program, so we were able to fund third-party organizations to go out and engage with schools, farmers, landowners, and the public. We were able to start issuing very basic weather or wildfire alerts. We were able to get information from the Met Office, and we started circulating those and building up our mailing list. We carried out a basic review on the advice that was issued relating to prescribed burning. And we carried out through universities a range of research projects looking at the impact on vegetation from wildfires. And those actions were largely completed by 2014, 2015. But there was a few things that we didn't deliver. We didn't create a wildfire forum, but we created a wildfire stakeholder group, which was established instead. But it had no formal terms of reference or anything. We weren't able to progress the strategic management plan for wildfires. And the review on legislation didn't really happen. It was there was a very basic overview which really just identified what legislation was there and where it was. So what went wrong? I think one of the things that went wrong was the interdepartmental group, as soon as it wrote its report and submitted it to the minister, it ceased to exist. So it disappeared. So there was no overarching organization or grouping there to keep pushing things forward. Hence, we'd no oversight or no governance. The stakeholder group kind of just drifted along doing wee projects with no clear strategic direction forward. There were no ownership of the recommendations. No one organization or groups of organizations was prepared to take ownership of one or more of the recommendations in the interdepartmental report. And there was no long-term strategic direction. So we took a little step back with the Environment Agency and the Fire Service. We started working closer together. We took on a more responsibility. There was some dedicated staff time allocated to the wildfire project. Within the Environment Agency, that was myself. The amount of work time that was spent on wildfire went from about 10% up to 80 to 90% of my time was dedicated to wildfire. The Fire Service had our national specialist, and I don't know whether he's here today. It's Mark Smith and myself. We worked extremely close together on looking at how we engaged with landowners, what advice we could give out, when we would issue press releases and things like that. So we built a stronger relationship. Coming out of that, we did shared training, both with the Environment Agency and the Fire Service, but with other government agencies such as Forest Service, some of the NGOs such as Mourne Heritage Trust, who would be involved in attending wildfires in their local areas. So we did joint attendance at incidents. We started sharing resources and knowledge. Now, from the department's point of view, we acquired a fleet of special wildfire ATVs, which were spec'd out to the guidance of the Fire Service. And then we have those pre-positions with the Fire Service. So they're not on our property, they're in the Fire Service proper stations, etc., where they've identified the risk and they can take them straight away to a wildfire incident. And we started then to develop our joint vision of what was going forward. So we, in early 2020, we started looking at what was the best way going forward. And we established then in March 21 the Strategic Wildfire Group for Northern Ireland. Now that consists of all the key government departments. It's government departments only, with one exception, which is Water Service. So largely, and I know I'll forget, you've got Department of Health, Department of Agriculture, the Environment Agency, Forest Service, Water Service, the Fire Service, the Police, the Department of Justice, Department of Communities. They all sit on that and they report directly to our ministers. That's the Minister for Agriculture and Environment. So they will report to him on an annual basis on the outcome of the work that they have been delivered. They then started to look at developing the strategic way forward and how we could and they would oversee its implementation. We then, in January 22, we established the Wildfire Forum, which was largely, we took our stakeholder group and we give them a formal terms of reference, how often they would meet, what they would be doing, what they would be responsible for. It has a chair and a vice chair. It reports then directly to the strategic group. And they were charged with looking at, they're going to be responsible for delivering actions on the ground and to contribute towards the delivery of the strategic way forward. So in developing our document, which we've gone out to consultation, we carried out a series of multilateral and bilateral workshops, engagements and meetings, because we wanted to build this from the bottom up, because we felt if it was very much coming from the government putting pressure down, there would be a lot of resistance. So if we built it from the bottom up, then there would be a lot of ownership. And that seems to have worked. So they contribute towards the writing of the draft document. That was subsequently submitted to our minister for his approval, which he granted. And we have now gone out to public consultation on it. So the current step that we're in, although it says here next step, is we are at the moment, our public consultation is launched. And I think some of you have circulated out the web links and all there for to access the document and the consultation. And we would welcome you. We're welcoming input, not just from Northern Ireland, but from the wider wildfire community. So do please take some time and give us your comments. We really would appreciate them. So we set out on it the strategic goals. They're simple on paper. Delivering them on practice will be challenging. We would like to reduce the number of our wildfires. We would like to reduce their impact on the environment and society and the economy. We're establishing a more structured framework for joint working and joint response and sharing of resources. We're trying to go forward by building more resilience into our landscapes, particularly those ones that we've already identified are susceptible to wildfire risk or can be badly impacted by wildfires. And also to continue to raise awareness amongst our communities and make them maybe more aware and prepared for wildfire events when they happen in their local area. So we identified agreed six strategic themes. Now these have been agreed from the local community right up to government departments. So this is where it was important to get buy-in. So we've just run through them there. You got governance overall. How will the strategic way, how will it be managed? What's the oversight, etc. on it? Engagement with landowners and the NGO sector and the conservation body and anybody who one way or another is either impacted in or directly involved in the management of wildfires. And then a crucial one there is looking at land management. As the Environment Agency, we have a lot of say in that because with our designated sites, which are designated for nature conservation, we can apply a lot of constraints on what landowners can or cannot do in the management of the land. And that can directly and indirectly have an impact on wildfire risk. Response. We will work with the fire service to increase their response by additional resources, additional training, being able to support them offline. Part of my job would be when I get notified of a wildfire incident, if I'm in the office, I can start to pull up data on our computer system and feed that data on vegetation and historic burdens, etc., through to the fire service. Starting to look at then our government policy and legislation and enforcement. One thing we identified through this process is we're quite weak in the enforcement. We'll arrive on site and we'll deal with the wildfire and then we'll pack up and we'll go home, and the enforcement afterwards is quite weak. And then we would look at the evidence. What scientific research is there that helps us look at our land management, our engagement, or our response? So that's all continually feeding back in to give us more information to improve our overall response. With 25 recommendations for action across those headings. I won't bore you by going through them all. I'll just point out some of them. Under governance, we will monitor the implementation of our strategy. We will continue to raise awareness. We will adapt. We will start to establish more local wildfire groups. We only have 2 in existence at the moment. We would like to hopefully get that up to 5, possibly 7 right across Northern Ireland, and that should give us really good coverage. We'll be looking at more wildfire management plans and wildfire response plans. At the moment, we only have 3 wildfire management plans. And again, we will look at more formalized actions around response. Not only will we have a shared resource, but we will come up with a national inventory that identifies resources that aren't necessarily within the fire service, but they sit across other government agencies and the private sector, and how they can be accessed in the event of an emergency. Again, looking at some of our weaknesses on policy and legislation. So we're starting to do the work at that and review, looking at what legislation there. This document itself, when it's finalised, will contribute a big part to our government policy going forward. And the one thing that we identified that we're still fairly weak on is research. We don't have strong ties with universities, although we've done some piecemeal research projects. So we want to strengthen that, and we will use that information to feed into the other actions coming out of the action plan. So our consultation closes on the 20th of June this year. That's the link where anybody can access all our how to get involved in the consultation. And the consultation, we will take the responses, we will consider them, and those will be fed forward into both the strategic group and the Wildfire Forum, and together then we will use those to develop a formal action plan, and that will then go to deliver the actions on the ground. And I can circulate this presentation afterwards for the link if anybody wants it. And that's really my presentation there concluded. That's the front page on the document. If we come across it, you'll know what it looks like. There are a series of 6 questions embedded within the document that we're asking the public to give us our response to. So thank you.